Hello everybody. Before we start with 2A and 2B, which is all about unit conversion, we're going to be dealing a lot of stuff with fractions, so I wanted us to make sure that we were clear on our fraction operations before we got started. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I asked in class, and a lot of us were not sure, which is A-okay, if you can write any number as a fraction, and in fact you can. Any number can be written as a fraction by putting it over 1. So, for example, 6 can also be written as 6 over 1. If you divide by 1, remember fraction mean division, so if you're dividing by 1, you just get the same thing. Same thing works with a variable. If you have some variable, or what we're going to be dealing with are units represented by letters, you can put it over a 1. And if you combine them, if you have 8k, then you can write that as 8k over 1. Now, why do you need to do that? That leads into our next thing, which is the multiplication rule. And what the multiplication rule says, that if you're multiplying fractions, if you have any fraction, a over b times c over d, what you do is you just multiply straight across. This is equal to AC over BD. And remember, if you have two things like this with no operation between them, that means multiplication. So, for example, if you have 7 over 3 times 2 over 5, then that becomes 7 times 2 divided by 3 times 5, which becomes 14 divided by 15. Okay, we also need to talk about unit fractions, and unit fractions are things that equal 1. Anything divided by itself is equal to 1. The numerator and the denominator represent the same value. And we can talk about a lot of different ways to do that. But if you have 7 over 7, then that's 1. If you have m over m, then that equals 1. But here's how we're really going to utilize this. If I have 1 minute over 60 seconds, 1 minute and 60 seconds represent the same amount of time, so that equals 1. If you have 1 gallon divided by 4 quarts, 4 quarts is equivalent to 1 gallon, so that also equals 1. All right, so once we have something divided by itself, something in common to the numerator and denominator, then we can cancel it out because it equals 1. So if you're simplifying fractions, anything in common to the numerator and denominator simplifies to 1. So in essence, what you probably, the verbiage that you were taught when you were doing math is that they cancel. So if you have some numerator over some denominator, and they are equivalent. If they are the same thing, then you can cancel them out. They simplify to 1. Okay. So let's do a couple of examples of this. If I have 2m times 3 over 7m, well, the first thing I'm going to do is go back up here, and I'm multiplying, which means I have to take this first fraction and turn it into, or first number and turn it into a fraction by putting it over 1. Anything divided by itself cancels or becomes 1. So what I have left in the numerator is 2 times 3 divided by 1 times 7, which gives me 6 over 7. If I have 5k times 5y divided by 6k, of course, I take that and put it as a fraction. I'm multiplying, so I have to have a denominator. The k's are the same, so they cancel out. So what I'm left with is 5 times 5 times y divided by 1 times 6, which gives me 25y divided by 6. Now I want you to put a star by this next one because this is where we're really going with all of this. If I have 10g times 4q over 1g times 2p over 1q. Okay, well, I have to put this over 1, of course. Then I have a g numerator and denominator. I have a q numerator and denominator. And all I have now is I have 10 times 4 times 2p, all divided by, and 1 times 1 times 1. So this gives me 80p over 1, or I can just write 80p. This is what you're going to be doing. And really, if you think about this, what you've just done is converted gallons to pints. I started out with 10 gallons. I solved it, I multiplied it by the equivalent of 4 quarts equals 1 gallon. We did that up before. And 2 pints is 1 quart. So I started out with 10 gallons and I end up with 80 pints. But we're definitely going to practice on this some more. And then finally, our last thing that we're going to do is convert fractions to decimals. And you're going to have to learn how to do this on your calculator. And remember that a fraction represent division. If you have a over b, that is the same as a divided by b. So for example, if I have 3 over 5, that would be the same thing as 3 divided by 5. And if I put that in my calculator, I get 0.6. By the same token, if I have 11 halves, what that really means is 11 divided by 2, and again, I get 5.5. Now you're going to have to become familiar with your calculator and how to do all these things. You can check with me during office hours and see what's going, see if I can help you. But I don't know if I'll be able to help or not. Okay, so that's the end of this one. and we'll go on to 2A.